been a lot of questions that has come in online. So what I would group them together, first of all, maybe for TK, and then there's a second set of questions, I think, for Bill, and then some more for Felix. Yeah. First of all, thanks TK for your interesting speech about CLP, and there's a lot of questions that when Hong Kong is facing down the coal power stations and bringing in more gas plant for generating electricity, would you consider other sustainable alternatives to further reduce CO2? And when you consider importing, will you also consider importing renewable power from China or other areas? And I think you make a very interesting point that, of course, being a very responsible organization, you need to ensure the source and carbon footprint about this power. So how would you be able to do that? Sorry, there's quite a lot of questions from the audience, but I think they're important questions. I tried to summarize them. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Henry. I think in my presentation, I already mentioned that the so-called near-term decarbonization path is to replace coal with gas. But there's a limit because of the fact that 2/3 of the carbon emission is from power generation, but then there are also other sectors. So even we turn the whole power sector into carbon-free, we would not be able to achieve very significant reduction in carbon. But turning power sector into carbon-free is really challenging, and we need zero carbon energy. And given the fact that in Hong Kong, the availability of renewable energy resources, and also the fact that we need interconnection with the mainland in order to bring zero carbon energy to Hong Kong. So this is actually a long-term. We need long-term planning in order to achieve that. And I want to highlight the point you just mentioned about the dedicated generation source, because now, first of all, if we do not know which source, then it could be from a coal-fired power station or whatever, diesel fuel kind of power station which emit carbon dioxide. So that's not something we want, because we don't want to basically get rid of something we don't want and then ask somebody to take it up. That's not a responsible company, and also Hong Kong should not do that. Now, I think the challenge is when we want to find or identify particular power station, we need a process. Now, firstly, how do we identify the appropriate source? Secondly is we have to ensure that the terms of buying that zero carbon energy is the best. So again, we need a process, and it takes time. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. Okay, Bill, thank you for the very interesting presentation about what you've said about Hong Kong electricity, and there's a lot of things going on. And one interesting area in terms of questions from the audience and looking ahead, could you talk about the encouraging renewable energy with the feed-in tariff schemes? Could you share something about that? And also, what are your experience in mobilizing your customers on saving electricity?
We have around, so far we have around 80 applications, less than COPs, and probably because Hong Kong Island is relatively densely populated. And as Mr. Wang of Huayuan mentioned today, our feed-in tariff now is very attractive. And feed-in tariff alone is a very good motivation for our customers to join this feed-in tariff. This is for one of the answers that I would give. The other thing is that we work a lot on the consumer side, the customer side, to give them public educations and awareness of the benefit of energy efficiencies and renewable energy. And in fact, we do it for a long time, as I mentioned in my earlier presentation. We do it more than 13 years. And we see the benefit of smart use of electricity. And so far, our customers is, we see the energy saving efforts a few years ago. And we continue to do it because we think it's good. And looking forward, we need to do more. And then supply side, we have our responsibilities. And customer side, we continue to work with them to save energy, smart use of energy, something like that.
Thank you. Thanks for both speakers for answering some of the questions that we have online. I would like to open the floor, and if there's any other questions from the audience here. Felix.
I think I asked this question before to Queenie. It's about the LNG bus or vehicle. And Queenie doesn't provide a satisfactory answer to me. Then I would like to ask the coming future potential LNG supplier, or because you have the storage. Would it be possible that in future we have the LNG supply? Can it transport it into Hong Kong for using LNG vehicle? But yeah, because transportation is one of the sector that is quite challenging, because we are still using a lot of gasoline and a lot of diesel, which is a lot of CO2 emission. So far, it seems that LNG and EV, of course, that's definitely should be promoted, but cannot for bus. Double deck is difficult to handle, and even though we have a lot of container, okay, some also talking about the closed through LNG for vessel. Yeah, vessel, also for vessel. That means we have the LNG supply or storage now. Could it be possible for two power company being as a supplier for those the LNG supply? Yeah, please.
If I may, try to answer. Now, first of all, the offshore LNG receiving terminal that we're now building, the primary objective of that facility is to provide fuel supply, natural gas supply, for our power station to generate electricity to fulfill the need of Hong Kong. So I have to make sure that everybody understand this primary objective. So, and I also stress the importance of reliability. So we have to ensure that this facility, the security of supply, is to ensure the reliability of electricity supply now. But having said that, if on the condition that the reliability of electricity supply is not affected, and we have spare capacity of that facility, I can't see any difficulty of leveraging such spare capacity for other uses. Now, actually, this is not uncommon in other countries where they have any kind of LNG receiving facility. They allow some other users to get access to that facility. Now, it really depends on what kind of users will need natural gas. It could be, for example, because actually this is becoming a very hot topic now because of the tightening of some of the regulation for ocean-going vessels. They have to really reduce their emission. So one possibility is for those big vessels to turn from diesel into, of course, ultra low sulfur diesel, but maybe probably LNG. LNG transportation system that Felix you just mentioned, or even some locally run ferries. They could also use LNG. So there are different opportunities, but it will really depends on the business case, whether justify, whether other, for example, supporting infrastructures are in place. and also depending on local regulation. But I would say that there are many possibilities.
Hong Kong Electric is nowadays we use natural gas through a single pipeline from Da Pang Terminal, and as we continue to increase our natural gas generation, we have a urgent need to have an alternative supply of natural gas to ensure that our supply is secure and reliable. So our main focus for this at this time is to have an urgent terminal to provide a secure supply for our power station at Lemma. So this is the primary focus and the objectives that we have in mind now. So as TK mentioned about the marine side, and as we improve power sector's emission, and you know that on the marine side, EPD pay a lot of attention about the pollution generated by the ships and things like that. And I think there's an opportunity to improve the fuel mix on their side to help reduce our emission. So I think government will look into this, but this is not our focus at this point in time.
If I may just add, I think this is share some of my work experience when I was director for Shell in Beijing. During the Beijing Olympics, I worked with the Chinese customer and the Chinese government in some of these areas for gas, for transportation, and certainly, you know, after LNG, after the liquefied natural gas has come into Hong Kong in the terminal after being regasified, it can certainly be from a technological point of view, if you want to use it for bus and transportation, you can use a form of technology called compressed natural gas, which you then compress the natural gas into a tank for the bus or the taxis. And they have put those on trial during the Beijing Olympics as a very clean form of transportation. Hope that helps. Any other question from the audience? Oh, yes.
Thank you. My question is to the two speakers. Will the power company open the feed-in tariff to like other innovative form of renewable energy, such as tidal power? Obviously, there's news about Star Avenue applying tidal power. So will the scheme be adjusted in the future?
So thank you for the question. Now, the spirit of the scheme is to promote renewable energy development. So in theory, it should be so-called applied to different kinds of technologies. Now, but as a matter of fact, the most common type of renewable energy development nowadays are, you know, wind and solar. And in order to have a more kind of simpler and more efficient operation of the scheme, so that's why we agree with the government that this scheme applies to these two types of renewable energy. Now, in future, we will have a regular review with the government, now both in terms of the feed-in tariff level and also the scope of such scheme. To, you know, where applicable, I think we might make some changes.
Excellent. Any other question? Oh, Tom. Maybe, Tom, you can also introduce yourself and mention about your EU Environment Group, which should be interesting for people here.
Yeah. Okay, my name is Tom Uiterwaal, and I'm the chairman of the Environment and Energy Business Council of the European Chamber. So I'm a bit undercover here, I think. No, so in that capacity, I really appreciate that if I look at the presentations, I see a lot of attention for renewable energy. So I think that's very positive. With my European background, there's one source of renewable energy missing, and that's biomass. That's not being discussed. And when you look in Europe, we're of course phasing out coal power plants, and we're turning them into biomass power plants. And also when I look in Asia, I see the same happening in South Korea and Japan. And actually Vietnam is a very important source of biomass. Question to the gentleman, have you ever considered changing the coal power plants we have in Hong Kong into biomass power plants?
Okay, maybe I go for some from a practical standpoint. And actually, our coal-fired power plant, or our power plant actually is heavily regulated by EPD. So environmental side, we need to make sure that our emission, our environmental impact is well addressed. And when we deal with biomass for our Hong Kong Electric experience, Lemon Island is quite remote, and remote means the logistic-wise, if you want to move some biomass to our plant, is kind of not easy. So, and it also creates a lot of, along the logistics, a lot of environmental issues that we need to address. And when you give a priority for dealing with this biomass, and where will you give it to? Will you give it to Lemon Island and let our plant to handle this biomass? And in China, because I used to work in China, biomass, there's a lot of opportunities for you to handle biomass, like in the water treatment plants and the waste mud, industrial waste mud, you can just put it in the incinerator and things like that. But for our case, we need to consider more from the environmental angle. How do we make it right to deal with this biomass? So I hope I addressed your question.
Maybe I supplement a little bit. Now, I think there are at least two issues we need to look at. First one is whether it's technically feasible, because Hong Kong, again, we so-called suffer from the challenge of lack of land. So our power station actually is quite congested. And one of the key requirements of turning a power station into a biomass power station, the logistic equipment for handling biomass is really quite, size-wise is significant. So whether it's feasible, I think this is a challenge. Secondly, as Bill just mentioned, another challenge of biomass power generation is the transportation of the fuel. Because even though the biomass itself may be kind of, carbon neutral, but the fact that you need to have, again, ocean-going vessel to bring the biomass from probably, other countries, into Hong Kong, that's a challenge. And that exactly is one of the criticisms, right, in Europe, in particular in UK, where, existing biomass power stations, they need to address. But I would say that we'll keep an eye on this development.
May I supplement a little bit? And when we deal with biomass, and the objective for dealing with biomass is dealing with the biomass. And what I mean is that biomass actually not generate a lot of energy necessary for us as a utility. So we look for massive solutions for providing reliable power to our customers. So it's about the priority and the focus.
Thanks. Interesting answer. Any other questions? Let's have a look. TK, there's a question here, but I don't know whether it's fair to ask you, but anyway, we will share, and if you feel free to say it is. There's a question from the audience about the design life of Daya Bay and how long it will last, and in terms of your longer term views on importing nuclear power from China, where else would you be looking towards? I don't know, that's a China question, so I don't know whether you feel free to, you are in a position to answer. If not, just say no. Yeah.
Maybe I try to share my view. Now, when we say importing zero carbon energy from China, as I said, actually we are competing with other buyers also. So if we are looking at existing plants, it's very challenging, because actually the existing plant, they're already current users. So and then, as I said, we are now looking at a more longer term target. say for example 2050. So we still have time. If we can use the time to do better planning, to identify probable site, maybe we can build our own plant ourselves. That's one way. Now second is even for existing plant, I think in Guangdong there are quite many nuclear power stations. If we talk about nuclear, okay, there are quite many nuclear power stations. So I don't think we should limit ourselves to one. Now, but technically speaking, to address the lifetime question, our understanding is that now for nuclear power station, I think at least it can be run for like 40 years. But there are also examples in other countries that with proper refurbishment, such power station the life could be extended to even longer, say maybe up to 60 years. So there are precedents. So technically speaking, it's also possible. So as I said, once we can identify a particular site, then we need to have pay the effort to really negotiate on the best terms for us to import the power.
Very good, TK. Thanks for answering that. And also, if I may just add a point, and this also came up during my discussion on nuclear power when I was invited to speak at Imperial College London, because they do one of the best postgraduate degrees in nuclear power engineering. And there was a lot of question about nuclear versus renewable. And certainly on the global stage at this moment in time, there is a lot of comparison going on between the cost competitiveness of nuclear versus renewable power, especially with the great amount of innovation that's been made, particularly in wind and in onshore wind and offshore wind and in solar, when the cost of power generation for wind is now really competitive and lower than nuclear. So that is posing quite a lot of questions for the nuclear scientists to consider. But hopefully they would face up to the challenge and improve the cost competitiveness of nuclear power without compromising any safety. Any other question? Felix.
In the presentation, in fact, Mr. Chiang mentioned about Hong Kong building is very tall and very tough. Then in other countries, we are talking about there's something called net zero carbon building. Yeah. It seems that there's no chance in Hong Kong to go for those kind of net zero building, even though the architect or the owner, give an instruction, please design a building for net zero carbon for me. Would it be possible in Hong Kong? What do you think?
No, I think I'm really not an expert in this area. But just off my head, I think for so-called net zero carbon building, it really depends on a whole host of factors. What kind of building you are talking about, the size, the usage of the building, the design, where the location. Actually, I recently remember I watched a BBC program which introduced this net zero carbon building. But in that program, as far as I remember, all those buildings are firstly very small, like standalone one-story kind of house, in which they try to do a lot of things to offset the carbon, including even they do indoor agriculture. Because now, again, it depends on what do you mean by net zero. Even including, for example, your meals. When you buy food, do you need to offset that carbon footprint? So it really depends on what do you mean by net zero. Yeah, so, but I'm really not expert. So.
I just searching on the internet, and the most recent case successfully in the commercial sector has happened in Amsterdam, I think. They do the carbon zero emission building. And I'm still learning it, but again, as TK said, I'm not the expert in this area, so I cannot give you anything.
Maybe if you allow me to step in, I must confess I did research on this and wrote about it in my new book, in climate change, because I was asked to advise some leading organization in this. It is absolutely true, like Bill said, there is a very famous net zero building in Amsterdam. And you can Google it on the website, and it's actually being currently run for, it won a lot of award, and it is being actually used by professional service companies. And it has co-working space and others. And in theory, the technology of net zero buildings are part of the new smart low carbon city design portfolio. And these portfolios are actually currently developed by a lot of architects in a lot of cities. There are a lot of international cooperation going on. For example, the new C40 city cooperation that is going on, including China. China is also a member of that. These are the set up after the Paris Agreement, when 40 of the leading cities in the world is now expanded to 99 cities. They decided, the mayor of all these cities decided to work together and exchange best practices. It's really, really exciting work that is going on, and they have an office in Beijing which is to promote this sort of work. Another good example is that actually China and UK have an exchange program on smart city. And certainly, I think like TK say, the new sort of design they look at includes certainly rooftop gardens, renewable generation, which companies like Google and Apple's already demonstrated. If you have renewable rooftops and others, and with fuel cells and with battery storage, you can have self-sufficiency in energy. And in some cases, you can even export energy if you do not need those. So, and the other one, which is very interesting, is urban agriculture, with the drive on the organic products demand and the high prices that you have to pay in supermarket. More and more NGOs are promoting urban organic farming. It's like in New York, there is a very famous NGO called Just Food, who would help you to teach you how to do organic farming in your New York apartment. I think similar sort of thing can be done in Hong Kong very easily, although the space is probably less. But there are certainly a lot of innovation thoughts, and there's, I think, as people become more environmentally conscious and become more health conscious, these are interesting trends which are happening around the world, which I could see happening in Hong Kong as well. Any other question? Oh, two other questions. And then after you.
I have want to ask to Hong Kong Electric. There's a joke. Some people said if I live in Hong Kong Island, or if I live in Kowloon or Literature, we will more go green because the electricity intensity, there's a difference between CLP and Hong Kong Electric. CLP just mentioned maybe in the future will go from 0.5 to 0.4, but this is but the Hong Kong Electric I know is about 0.7. This is how Hong Kong Electric to help the resident to reduce their carbon emission.
This is not a joke, this is a fact. And in fact, as I mentioned in my presentation, and we are actually working on it. And with the increases of natural gas in our fuel mix, we push our carbon emission down. And again, as why we are here, because we think that this is not enough. And what are we going to do is the subject that we need to really look at it seriously in the future.
Good. There's another gentleman here on the center.
Today looks like the main theme today is the decarbonization, which means cut down the use of fossil fuel, especially for coal. Today we have three main power producers here, including China, Hong Kong University, and also the CRO. I got a question about that. But before I talk with Mr. Goh about that, he talked about the recover for energy from waste. Every time I go by the power station, I saw a lot of waste discharged from the power station, including the flue gases with high temperature, maybe more than 100 degrees C, and some the steam discharged from the power plant. I want to know, is there any way to recover those heat from those waste for power generation?
Okay, now I think this is a very good question. Now there are two aspects. One is how do we so-called recapture the waste heat? In the process of turning coal into gas, actually the technology that we are now using for gas generation, we call it combined cycle power generation. So the word combined cycle means the first cycle is the burning the gas to generate power. But the second cycle is exactly to capture the residual heat and then to generate additional power. So with that technology, actually the efficiency has been significantly increased. So I think in principle, I totally agree that we should try to capture the waste heat or residual heat as much as possible. Now for coal-fired power station in the past, first is technology was not common at that time. Secondly, actually, also related to whether you have any users for those so-called residual heat. In other countries, a lot of the time there are industries that basically they can take the residual steam directly. Now, but in Hong Kong, basically we do not have any industry here in Hong Kong. So all those are historical reasons. But going forward, if we have gas generation, then basically we can try to maximize the capture of those residual heat. Now this is first aspect. Second aspect actually is even we have the so-called residual heat utilization, but the extent of carbon reduction will be limited if the primary fuel is still fossil fuel. So that's why, as I said in my presentation, if we want to go for a really significant reduction in carbon, then we really need to look at the source of fuel. If we stay for gas, it will be quite limited.
Peter.
Yes, I've been listening to you, and it's very interesting too. Thank you for two very interesting presentations. And the situation is not easy to become carbon neutral. I just want to hear your thoughts about carbon capture, because it seems like you're stuck with fossil fuels for quite some time. So what are your thoughts on carbon capture, and especially for burning gas?
I speak in personal term, and in the past 10 years, actually, we look around what happened in China and elsewhere on the carbon capture. And I make it in short is that there's a lot of difficulties to make it work. And for our case, we buy LNG, so we are not connected to a gas field. So can we send this CO2 back to the gas field and then trap it inside the field? And what infrastructure you need to invest to get it done? And what's the cost of it and to the customers? So there are many ways to solve the same problems. Carbon capture is one thing. And shall we have another alternative that's more economical, affordable for our customers? This is what we always go for. I think it takes some time for carbon capture to really on the ground. And like Huarun, they are in Hangfei, or where's the place? Yes, they have a pilot plant. We always keep an eye on what they're up to, but it's not easy, I just say.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, I want to know whether do you have the plan for the renewable like wind and solar PV for the projects, the capacity over 1 megawatts? Do you have any plans for the feed-in tariff or others?
Now, in the actually in the civil control, we already said that for the feed-in tariff, it would be according to the published price, $3, $5, $3, $4, $5 for large, medium, and small scale installation, respectively. Now, for installations above 1 megawatt, it would be on a case-by-case basis. So we need to discuss with the so-called renewable energy developers, and we also need to have government approval.
Okay, if there's, one last question over there at the back.
Thank you. With changing your fuel mix more from coal to natural gas, and natural gas being a commodity that's subject to price fluctuations, the short-term trend has been, prices decreasing, but how concerned are you with the long-term price of natural gas, and what would a price doubling or tripling mean to your customers?
Maybe I try to reply now. First of all, international fuel markets is very volatile. Now, if I have the crystal ball, then basically I would not speak here. So actually, just now you said the short-term wise the price is decreasing. That may not be true. Actually, just recently, actually it gone up quite a bit because of the oil price. Most of the natural gas price are linked with oil price. So likewise for our gas contract. So actually over the past months, our price actually went up, although not very significantly. But as a matter of fact, it's very volatile. Secondly is, in general, I would say gas price is much more expensive than coal. So if we want to switch from coal to gas, basically we are already under pressure of increasing tariff, and that's a fact. And going forward, the more proportion of gas we want to burn, then basically the pressure will increase. And then looking forward, if we want to so-called switch from gas to renewable, then it really depends on the price of renewable. Now, the price of renewable has been decreasing quite significantly. But up to now, I would still say that the cost of renewable is still more expensive than conventional fossil fuel generation. But in 10, 20 years or even longer time frame, what it will look like, I don't know. But I think the direction is that I still believe that the renewable energy costs will continue to decrease. It's just a matter of question of when it will become more affordable than today.
May I supplement a little bit? Actually, I concur TK's views on the renewable. I built renewables in China in the past, and renewables, whatever you build, same plants, 2,000 hours per year. And our traditional plants, should it be nuclear, should it be coal-fired, natural gas, we are talking about one plant will provide you at least 5,000 of utilization hours, which means if you want to use of wind to serve you, maybe you need to three times of wind and then sit another maybe gas-fired power plant to serve when there's no wind. So we start to use natural gas in 2006, and we CLP has more history than us, and in terms of using natural gas, and we survived 13 years. We look the cycle up and downs, and we do a lot of work on it. So saying in most humble way, we manage this cost and using the most prudent way. And of course, fuel, if you talk about coal actually shoot to rocket high from maybe 15 years ago, 10, 20 years ago, and because of the China's boom, right? So our job is to manage the fuel to give our customers affordable electricity, and we keep doing this. So we don't have answers. I don't have answers for you for that, but commercial risk and risk management, we're always doing this work for our customers.
Well, I'd like to, it's been a very, very good Q&A session. We had 40 minutes of good discussion. I'd like to thank the two speakers and the audience for all your great questions and all your great answers.